Hello everyone, welcome back to another speed paint. Now, this speed paint is a little bit special because I do something that I think all artists should do, and I honestly I don't do this nearly enough in my art. I'm not critical of my art enough to be confident doing this, but I think it's really important for all artists to learn when to use this. And some people might not like what I'm about to say when it comes to what I later up doing in this art, but I think it is important. I think it is very important for when an artist realizes that there's no way a piece can continue in its current fashion. But before we get there, I want to give some context for why I'm drawing Dusty. I noticed that there wasn't any good Dusty art for 2026 yet. It's been quite a while since I drew some nice, clean Dusty art, and I wanted to get that out of the way because new Dusty art, I can use it for new profile pics on Discord or whatever. I just wanted some new Dusty art for 2026, so wanted to do something pretty simple. And right here, I'm not super happy with the way the proportions turning out. It looks weird. The way Dusty looks back at the camera looks kind of weird. So I'm going back and adjusting the proportions to get things looking right. And I'm twisting things around. I'm trying to figure things out, and it's just not working. And you're gonna see me how I've been basically redrawing this same pose over and over again. And I can't get it. Like, nothing I'm doing is working. So I give up and I start completely from square one. I map out the exact proportions I want. I draw some shapes and I draw some lines connecting those shapes. So I know exactly what I want. I know exactly what proportions I want to be working with. And I think it was ultimately for the best because I got Dusty in this pose, which I think is way better than any of the previous poses I drew for Dusty. And basically, yeah, that's what I did. If you noticed, I basically threw out a full sketch of Dusty. I threw out a complete finished sketch, and because I just didn't like it. I didn't like the way it looked. The proportions looked awkward. I didn't like it. And I'm kind of really glad I threw out that original sketch, because I think what it later ended up making wouldn't look nearly as good if I kept that original sketch. And that's kind of what this art piece is about. You kind of have to learn when an art piece cannot continue in its current form. Like, if there's something that's really bugging you about an art piece and you just can't quite put your finger on it, try completely redrawing the piece from scratch, and it might be apparent. It might be apparent why whatever's bugging you about that art piece will show its face. It will show its true colors on why you just don't think it looks very good, even if you can't pinpoint the exact reason. And I think I think there's a certain level of, I don't think skill is the right word, but it requires a bit of resolve to understand, yeah, this sketch sucks, I'm not going to continue with it. I don't want to continue with this. And to completely restart the entire thing from scratch to identify the problems with what you drew previously is something that I personally haven't done nearly enough of. And I think that it ultimately really benefited me. And overall, I think it was one of the best decisions I made for this. It was the best decision I made for this art piece, because if you compare the two, I'm going to do like a comparison later once the actual artwork is done. I think that completely redoing the entire sketch from scratch with the exact proportions I want mapped out did wonders for this art project, did wonders for this piece, and ultimately I am a million times happier with the way it came out over if I stuck with it originally. So that's kind of the big thesis when it comes to this specific speed paint. This one did take a while for me to finish, because for every extra character I add, even if it's just 2 Dusties, but that's still technically 2 characters. So each additional character that I add adds like 50% of the drawing time that it would normally take. Especially because line art is a absolute beast, and I definitely love line art. As you can see, it's fighting with me. But yeah, and once we get into like the shading, there's going to be a lot more opportunities to see how I deal with that, because the shading on this was a little bit tricky. So yeah, now I'm going back and cleaning up all the edges, making sure that the line art looks nice. I've kind of gotten to where I'm really picky about how line art looks in certain aspects of a art piece. So, and to kind of get rid of the more bulgy points, not like the more blunt ends of the line art. I think my art looks a little bit better if I sharpen the ends of some of the line arts, to give it more of a not cell shaded, but I guess more of a cleaner look. So now I'm going in with the color, and I believe now it's when I start shading. So for this specific art piece, I go with some soft shading. I decided to go with a dark maroon color for Dusty, and I make sure to fill in the darker parts of his fur with a darker shade of that, like deep red maroon color, so that way the shading stays consistent. This is the way I do my soft shading now. I do a mix of both, like hard shading and soft shading, depending on how far away the light source is from an object. And I never did this for a very long time because it's just too much effort, and I'm really glad I started doing it now, because it ultimately makes an art piece look a lot more realistic, and, well, realistic for my art style, really. Because if you add shading, it's really easy to fall into a trap of, despite the shading having depth, it still looks flat. So I think if you want to get serious about your shading, you make sure, like, you really keep an eye out from how objects block light, and how the light gets sharper, or the shadow gets sharper or softer depending on how far away that object is. And I'm really, like, putting it to the test. Usually my shading gets quite smooth towards a finished project, but you can see when it's in its more rough state right now. And currently right now, when I get all the shading done, I go in with the not an airbrush, but like kind of like like a smoothing tool to smooth out all of the rough patches in the shading. See, like, look at there, right there. I think a good example of what I was talking about earlier with having objects cast a harsher or softer shadow depending on how far away it is. You can see that really close when you get a good look at, like, Dusty's stomach and, like, Dusty's, like, thigh. The way his chest fur, like, the way his chest fur kind of blocks out that specific part of the light, adds a ton of depth. And I think if you master that, I think you will, like, really level up your shading skills. So yeah, now we're going back, and now we're, like, smoothing out some of the rougher edges in the shading. And yeah, going back and changing the color of Dusty's I changed the shading of Dusty's like paw and mouth because those play by like a different rule book because they're a bit shinier. They don't they're the light works a little bit differently when it comes in contact with his mouth and like paws. So I wanted to make sure I get the colors just right on that. All right, so now I'm getting into the highlights. It's one thing for your shading to have depth, but you also can't neglect your highlights. The highlights also play a very large role in making sure the shading looks good. So far, from my personal experience, the highlights aren't nearly as strict as the core shading is. Like, you can get away with being a bit more imperfect with the highlights, where the shading you have to be like pretty on point. But so far, in my experience, highlights are significantly easier to deal with. Adding light, at least to digital art, is a little bit easier overall to deal with than removing light. So here I go and adding. So I'm adding like a deep shine to Dusty's paw beans, and I just recently started doing this with the most recent like Dusty arts, and I really like it. I really like how shiny and gummy Dusty's nose and paw beans are. Like, I think this is like the second only art I've ever done that type of shading with Dusty, and I think it's a keeper. I think that's if I'm going to have a if I'm going to continue doing Dusty in soft shading like this more often, then that's how I'm probably going to shade those parts of his body. So I believe I'm mostly done with the shading, so now I'm getting onto the background. I didn't have a super strong idea for what I wanted the background to be on this. Dusty usually, well, my personal branding in general has this like very early 2000s geometric style to it. Almost like a proto Frutiger Metro look to it. And I kind of want to capture that with the background, so I just made a big grid and just made different colored squares. And yeah, that's the finished piece. And I'm going to put up a comparison right now on the sketch I ended up going with compared to the very first sketch. And you can definitely see how strong of a difference that makes on how the art piece later, how the art piece later ended up benefiting from me restarting, because I don't think the proportions would have looked weird, and I don't think I would have been nearly as happy with the final outcome if I didn't restart. So, moral of this art piece: if you really don't like how an art piece is going, and you just can't pinpoint why it looks that way, why you don't like it, try restarting it, and if you keep getting the same result, try to break stuff down into its fundamental elements, like how do you want things to look, how do you want things positioned in the most simple way possible, and pay attention to those details, and restart the drawing from there, and then your mind will open up about how you'll better be able to put your imagination actually on paper or a tablet or whatever, because a lot of artists struggle with putting their imagination on to the canvas, and I think breaking down things to its very, very simplistic shapes and giving it a few attempts before you finally settle with something that you like is a really, 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 really good way to handle it. And overall, I think that benefited this art piece way, way better in the long run. But yeah, that's it. That is this speed paint for now, and I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you very much for tuning in. See ya.